Well, we're in Asbury's Beeson Center, and I've got a couple of doctoral students here with me, and looks like a good
Don't
number
think
of.
we're smart though. Don't get any ideas.
You can't see them, but it's good to see many of you joining. I want to welcome you. We were working through Romans last year, and we started, I think, in like chapter 6, but then I started recording in 7, and someone is working to make those videos available. I went through Romans 12, but we thought we would start with a new book, and the idea was to work with Luke. So hopefully you can see my screen. Can you see that?
Yes. Yeah, we can see it.
Good. And I've got a color coding applied filter in my Logos Bible software, and some of you may not be able to see it if you're colorblind, which some people are. But if you can see it, green are conjunctions.
That's green, isn't it?
No, that's been there. Purple are prepositions. Orange are conjunctions. And in this case, you have really a combination of a conjunction with and I might just highlight that green because that's really a conjunction ke plus a pronoun. So I might put a green highlight on that just to alert me that there's something else going on there. Red are non-indicative moods. So infinitives, participles, subjunctives. And then blue are adverbs. And then there's some other additional marking. Hi, Mara. Gray highlighted words are quantitatively specified words. And I found that often such quantified specification carries not only semantic weight, but also prominence is for the sake of prominence. And it's all, and then these yellow highlighted words are perfect tenses, imperfect, pluperfect, and then perfect. Now, the purpose of this color coding is that, I teach exegesis around these areas. So pronouns, for example, will often tell a story. And plus there are, Greek has 9, really, if you start adding the different kinds of qualitative, quantitative pronouns, it has a dozen or so different pronouns. And so some of them are quite exegetically significant and they're not translated very well. So something as simple as a pronoun, paying attention to the story, the perspective of the discourse, as well as the special uses of pronouns and special pronouns, is often exegetically significant. So with that overview, of just the color coding, what you're seeing, I'll read through the Greek text. I might ask for some other people to read through. I use a Koine Era Pronunciation, which
Don't worry, we don't all use that though.
Yeah, but so the Erasmian pronunciation system was pretty much made up and came out of a climate of not liking the Greek culture. At the time, there was anti-Greek sentiment, Hellenistic sentiment. So really, we want to try to be historically accurate as much as we can. And so the Koine Era Pronunciation is a way to do that. Plus, it helps us to recover some of the poetics and rhyming of the text. I'm not a real good pronouncer. If you don't want to get too hung up on that, that's fine. Good. Yeah, Jesse. Okay. So we'll just struggle with that a little bit. Some people are really good pronouncers, but
I can pronounce nicely in Kep.
Kep.
Good.
Yeah, Kep. So we call Koine Era Pronunciation Kep. All right. Well, this is the opening of Luke's Gospel, and it's really a tour de force of we'll see, of kind of virtue signaling of ancient literary ideas and words. There is a lot of technical language in these opening verses that would have been recognizable to a trained rhetorician, trained historian, Jewish historical words, Greek historical words, and I'll try to point out some of those to you, but it really is a tour de force, as well as some virtue signaling of, hey, I can do historical writing, and you should pay attention to that. So, epi de per pollu epikiresan anataxiste diegestin periton peplero fore menon en emin pragmaton. We'll go ahead and just start with that. Would anyone like to translate?
I mean, I think I'd be cheating because I just read this last week. So.
That's okay.
No, I didn't volunteer myself.
So epi
Okay.
de per.
So, strange conjunction. Since much, because much,
Not much, but pollu. Many.
Oh, yes. Okay. It's loop one.
Nominative. That's the subject of this clause.
Many have attempted to compose
Anatasso, to orderly arrange.
to order, and then the next word is like
Diegesin.
yeah, so like to orderly arrange
That's the direct object. It's third declension noun.
I can read some
Diegesis.
a narrative.
Yeah, a narrative.
Concerning participle or passive participle.
As a perfect middle passive participle, masculine, or actually here neuter genitive plural, going with pragmaton, which is the parts the same. It's from pragma. Deeds or things accomplished.
Yes. So many have basically attempted to compile a narrative concerning what has concerning what has been fulfilled in these events
So concerning the
among
events
happening
or matters having been fulfilled among us. So this is when I work with Greek sentences, you need to think of them in terms of chunks, and usually things that belong together will be together. Now there's violations of that, usually for rhetorical effect. And these when they're not together, when they should be together, they're called discontinuous constituents. And you can see that with a verb, and sometimes the direct object will come after it, and then there'll be a modifier of the direct object put forward, or vice versa. And usually when you have that kind of discontinuity, it's for some kind of rhetorical effect. But generally, things that belong together stay together. And here you have a big sandwich technique. I call it a sandwich, where you have a preposition with its object, peri going with pragmaton, and then you have sandwiched in between it a participle, and then its adjunct or its prepositional phrase is modifying it, having been fulfilled among us. So these are modifiers that are modifying pragmaton, and so when we run across a participle, we always need to ask, what kind of participle is it? What kind of function does it have? And this one is an adjectival use. And then when we think of adjectival uses of participles, we need to think of the types of adjectival uses, functions generally. And those are attributive, when they're modifying a noun or a substantive, which this one is. We could also think of substantive use, when the adjective stands alone and functions like a noun. And then we have a predicate predicate use where it's part of a statement being made about a subject. Those are typically nominative case. So we don't have that here. Other adjectival uses I classify would be adverbial, when usually it's a neuter singular is used of an adjective. So that doesn't really apply to participles. So yeah, this is a adjectival attributive use of the participle. So this is from a verb pleirophoreo, to fulfill. And so what I start to then look at, so we have this verb of undertaken, so epikareo, and it is working with a complementary infinitive. So again, once you see a non-indicative mood, you need to think, what construction is it in? So this is something, these non-indicative moods are typically something you learn in second semester Greek, depends on the textbook. But so now let's kind of look at some of the prominence devices and constructions. So epideiper. So one of the benefits of learning beginning Greek is that you learn typically vocabulary occurring 50 times or more. And this is kind of the standard vocabulary. That gets you about 81% of the words in the Greek New Testament. And one of the benefits of that is that if you start encountering words that have a lesser frequency, you're getting into a choice that the author is making to choose one word as opposed to a more, maybe perhaps a more common word. Now, when I look at epideiper, I would say this is a jacked up conjunction. I call it jacked up. It's not common. That's right. It's not common. You're not going to learn this one in beginning Greek 1 and 2, typically. You're not going to learn it. You might be able to get epi. Epi is what you might learn. So actually, this conjunction is jacked up because it actually has two additional morphological elements, the de and then the pair. Now, pair is really fun because you could look up pair in our lexicons. Here I have LSJ open, Liddell Scott Jones. This is the standard classical lexicon. We can also look it up in BDAG. And what's interesting about pair is that it never occurs alone in New Testament Greek. It's always added to conjunctions. And I would say it's added for effect. It's added for effect. And even our lexicon recognizes that with intensive or extensive force. So when this word is added to conjunction, there's some stress, additional stress on it. It takes a little bit more cognitive effort for the listener to hear it. They would recognize this as being jacked up. And then the day is also adding something here. So day, and you get these long conjunctions that are piling up different things. And this is, again, I think our lexicons are correct in this case, a marker that invites attention to what is being stated. So this is ramped up in two ways. Epideiper, since, because, but it's really more than that. Now it's interesting that this lexicon, the translation here, NASB translated in as much as. So yeah, I don't know what to think about that. You can see that the lexical entry for epideiper is intensified form of epidei. So epidei has its own lexical entry. When, after, reason or cause, because. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm really happy with this translation, in as much as.
You could just say since.
Yeah, you could say since. And I would then want to somehow capture the intensive force of the day and the pair. And so I've translated through Mark's Gospel now with the Glossa House Illustrated. Mark, translated through John. I've translated through the book of Acts. And in those translations, especially John and Acts especially, I wanted to translate everything that was there. And so it's kind of hard to do that in this case because you have three components, the epi, the de, and the pair. So since indeed, and maybe like in fact or something I might add.
It's flawed. Because
Why?
if we are trying to do every little sense of something that was in a language that doesn't function like ours, like when we say since, we're saying in as much, we can still be communicating that force.
Really?
With one word.
The semantic idea of cause, but are we really translating the force? No, I would say. And nuance.
Dealing with the language, you're dealing with the author's choice.
Yeah.
So the author made a choice here. Why did
to
Luke
ramp it up,
choose to intensify this?
So
this
then
conjunction?
we could say so in as much as.
Yeah, I don't think
Or
so.
since.
Well, I don't even think that in as much as captures it. Since indeed, in fact, might do it.
See, then that's as my friend Bill Mount says, that's trash can English.
Not really. I think it makes perfectly good sense.
That's
It's a jacked up way of saying because. So anyway, these are these are translational philosophies, but I pay attention to nuance. Like this is a choice, and this is the beginning of a literary work, and that Luke would begin with such a large conjunction, I think, carries effect, and we should somehow try to translate that that literary nuance that he has here. Mara, were you going to say something?
When you were going over the different parts, somehow I was gleaning that the epi de pair had more of a despite, or like even though. And was I like not hearing you right at all?
Yeah, I don't think it has an even though. It's more of a because or since.
Because.
Okay. Because others have tried. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. That's a suggestion. Since indeed, in fact, I think we have to look at what's Luke's point here. There is so they've endeavored to write up to an orderly. So this is from Anna and Tasso. So they've endeavored to write up a narrative. And so we have to keep translating. What is it that he's really striving after? He wants, basically Luke is going to be adding something. He's going to be doing something. And we're going to get to the main sentence. This is all subordinate clauses. The main sentence actually is found in verse 3. Edoxen ke emi parakalu thekoti. It seemed good also to me. And then what seemed good? To write up accurately in order for you. So that's what Luke, that's the main sentence. It seemed good to me to write up for you an orderly, accurate and orderly account. So Luke is, I think he's saying this is a worthwhile topic. I think that's the main point that is. In fact, many have undertaken to write up an orderly account, the narrative. And so he's adding to this growing literature, this growing undertaking, and he is profiling what he's doing by the modifiers accurately, akribos, and then in an orderly fashion. And so this word akribos is found in Thucydides' history, and this is a part of his value as a historian. And so Thucydides is often thought to be the father of modern history. Of course, that discounts like biblical narratives, which what were they doing? But modern in terms of Western civilization. Okay, Herodotus was before him, but Thucydides is often thought to really make what's interesting and important about Thucydides' Peloponnesian War is that he is self-reflective about the process of evaluating evidences, working with eyewitnesses or not, and admitting, he's like, look, I wasn't present at everything. And so I've had to kind of reconstruct it based on what probably most likely needed to be said. And so Thucydides is actually creating these speeches, and it's a really amazing work. But in his preface, his prologue, he is self-reflective and just admits certain things. Well, Luke is using some of this terminology here, but he also is saying, it seemed good also for me. So this is a crisis of ke and emu, and emu is a emphatic form of mu. You've got the personal pronoun ego, mu, me, and me, but you can ramp those up by adding an epsilon to the front. So rather than me, you can have eme. Rather than mu, you can have emu, and whatnot. Now, because this has a ke added on the front, a kai or a ke, this is already adding something different, and for prominence, adding Luke to the picture, even I. So it seemed good also to me, for me. And then this me is qualified by this participle clause, having followed everything from the beginning, or is the anothen modifying to write up? Probably writing up. So this writing up, then, I mean, this is what we have to decide, is what's modifying what. So in Greek, you have main sentence elements. You have subjects, verbs, objects that are required by the verb. And then we have conjunctions at the front that tend to be fronted. Everything else in the sentence is a modifier. And we need to decide, what does each modifier modify? And this is the practice of exegesis. And then we also can ask, how does it modify it? And then at a higher level of thinking, in terms of discourse, why does it modify it? So what are the basic elements? What are the modifiers? What modifies what? How does it modify it? And why does it so modify it? So we're looking really at the main sentence is right here. And it's jacked up. It's jacked up because you have an extra ke with a emphatic form of the pronoun, and that those probably go together. You have a perfect tense verb form, a participle that is modifying the me, and it probably requires some of these adverbs to go with it. Otherwise, it's kind of standing there, having followed. And so typically in the translation, you can see that this is where they've put that these modifiers are working with parakaleo, followed. Now this verb following takes the dative. So here you have the pasin is the dative from pas upon, having followed everything. Now, how has he followed it? Well, there's two adverbs, anothen, from the beginning, and then akribos, accurately. And this is, this raises questions for us, like how has this author, which we presume is Luke, how has he followed up? Does this mean that he was present? Or just that he, like in other words, followed Jesus from the beginning? Was he one of the disciples? Was he attending? Or, but notice that you follow somebody with the person attended in the dative, so dative of person. Well, we don't have a dative of person, we have a dative of thing. which might mean that the following has to do with kind of like research, like following up everything from the beginning and then accurately. So this would be not that he's followed Jesus per se, but that he is paying careful attention, taking note of. And notice that then our lexicon has an entry that indicates when you have a dative of thing, you're dealing with a different kind of following. Yeah. So then we have the infinitive, which technically is the subject of edoksen. So edoksen means to seem or to be to deem, and what's deemed good, to suppose, think. And this what seems good to me is then the subject, to write up carefully for you. So to write up carefully for you seemed good also to me. So I know that kind of sounds weird because we can translate it into English and it makes sense. Like, it seemed good to me to write up to you. But really, grammatically, the to write up is the subject of that verb. And it's typical in this construction. So technically, that is the subject, this part here that I have and highlight right here. It seemed good to me to write up accurately for you seemed good also to me. All right. And then we have a vocative. Kratiste theophile. Vocatives, typically when we learn them, we may not memorize the endings because they're often easily recognizable because they're set off by commas. That's what we have here. And this is a superlative form of an adjective. So adjectives have 3 degrees. The basic degree, which I forget its name. And then we have the comparative, what's it called? The ordinal, no, it's cardinal. No, those are numbers. There's like the basic meaning. But then, so this
Positive?
is positive, thank you. Positive degree, thank you. So you have a positive degree. So this is from kratus, meaning strong, but then you can put it into a comparative form, which is another degree. And then you can put it into the superlative degree. And that's what we have here. Most excellent theophilus. And this superlative degree is found in the book of Acts twice, referring to Roman officials, Festus and Felix. And that may be a clue that Theophilus may be some kind of Roman official, maybe even the patron of Luke writing this, who's been commissioned to write this out. And there's an audiobook series, I forget, it might have been Focus on the Family or some other, that was kind of dramatizing this. And actually that was the situation that they had, that Theophilus was a patron who was like supporting Luke to write this account up. And I think it's very plausible. Theophilus is curious too, because it means literally God lover, friend of God. And so it could be that this is any reader who might consider him or herself a friend of God. That's another possibility. Some other proposals are that this is a priest or a high priest of some kind. Yeah, Theophilus is a priest.
He was just his friend.
Yeah. Okay. So that's verse 3. Any other questions? Yes.
Hey, this is Brian. Is there a reason that we wouldn't necessarily see those 3 adverbs in order, where Luke is kind of adding emphasis by stacking them?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Rather than putting it with as kind of pertaining to I write to you, but he's like stacking these, right? So it's everything carefully from the beginning. And it seems to me in order, right? It feels like, is there a grammatic reason why we wouldn't stack those and see them as an intensive kind of thing on his part?
Yeah, I think the stacking is certainly taking place. So you have some, if you think about the reader or the audience hearing this, they would be hearing 3 adverbs in a row, and they'd have to be processing which one goes with which. And I was doing that. I do think that the first 2 need to go with kaleo. And then that this accuracy one, or like in order, needs to go with writing up. But there is certainly an effect of having these 3 adverbs kind of piled in near proximity.
But you would say that the in order needs to go with to write.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. But, in terms of like a preaching point or a teaching point, yeah, from the beginning, accuracy, and then laid out, in order. But I think the in order is the narrative construct that Luke is going to be providing. Yeah, which becomes really interesting when you compare the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The Sermon on the Mount is scattered across Luke in like 3 or 4 different chapters. So that's interesting. So then that begins and if he's claiming that he's trying to do it more accurately in a certain kind of order, then that raises the question whether Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, is an epitome, which I think it is. But I would tell my students, it's not like Jesus couldn't have said this altogether, and he may have. And he said these things more than once. I'm a teacher and I'm teaching all the time, and I repeat things, and sometimes it's more polished, sometimes not. But in keeping with kind of the teacher tradition, the philosophical tradition, we had Jonathan Pennington here last week talk to us about Jesus as a philosopher. And if you read Hans-Dieter Betz's commentary in the Hermeneia series, he lays out the arguments why we should understand the Sermon on the Mount as an epitome, like a compilation of the teachings of Jesus. And I'm really quite okay with this. This is a matter of literary form. But Luke does the content from the Sermon on the Mount is found in different locations in Luke, and he's trying to lay out things in a certain order that is meaningful.
I was going to say, we're a little past it, but the pair mounts suggest considering that.
So in what verse? In 1.
1.
Epi pair, considering that.
Considering that many.
Considering, so making it kind of like a participle kind of idea. Yeah, with the implied sense or in the context of these other. Yeah. Okay.
So, can I ask one more question? And I know that I'm jumping ahead with this, but you've got 3 adverbs there that are kind of stacked.
Yeah.
And then you follow that in verse 4 with the catechethys.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the interplay between those as Luke is kind of working through. Assuming, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but with catechethys there being
cathexes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Says.
Yeah. But just wondering about the interplay between those those adverbs, even though they're not modifying so close together.
They're not modifying the same verb. Yeah, I don't think.
Right. But I'm just, again, maybe I'm jumping, forgive me. But if you look at verse 4, I think of when I see that, when I see kataikeo, instruct, catechize.
Yep.
And then of kind of following those 3 specific adverbs, my radar pings a little bit.
Oh yeah, they're all related. So the first 2 really have to relate to Luke's authority to write such a thing. And then the third adverb has to do with his skill and relates particularly to the point of accuracy, which is the purpose of all of this. So we'll go to verse 4. We'll come back to verse 2. But in order that ina epignos, this is the purpose, this is the goal of his carefully writing up, is that you would know And I like to translate purpose clauses as would know, not may know, might know. Because if you think about a purpose, the outcome, well, the outcome is uncertain. And so you might suggest a may or might. On the other hand, that translation is kind of like how students are taught generally to translate subjunctives, which I think is often wrong. Like there's not many constructions where may or might actually is used for the subjunctive. Instead, a purpose construction expresses the intentionality and the goal. And that goal is in fact certain. Would, in order that you would. Now, whether that's realized or not, that's not in Luke's purview. His goal is clear, that you would know, not that you may know. Like, so I'm writing this and maybe you will know. Maybe. No, he's writing with the goal that he would know. There's no may or might attached to his purpose.
And that is dependent on how you understand the semantic domain of the word may in English.
True. And I would think that for most English speakers, may is soft. And I would argue for that. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas would is not. So yeah, this is a peculiarity of me. But if you think about it.
Often has the implication of being past.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I would feel like would is like a firm. Like
it's firm.
Would
in order, especially when it was in order that.
Whereas may is kind of like,
yeah, you may do, you may not. And that's on the receiver's end. You can't control that. But when you're talking about from the author's perspective, the writers, the intention is actually very clear. They're not wishy-washy. I'm going to write these 24 chapters and then Acts and maybe you'll get it. No, he wants them to get it in order that you would know the certainty. So there's the direct object of know. And then the certainty, and then the certainty of the words. I would suggest that the logon is actually fronted modifier of the certainty of the words. And it's probably because it's attracted to its relative pronoun clause concerning which you were taught. The words concerning which you were taught. The certainty of the words. And then you have a relative pronoun clause, perion. It's genitive masculine plural, agreeing with logon. And then you have a word of catechesis, katekeo, which is pretty remarkable. So we have, we're going to see that we actually have three cultural terms of passing on. We've encountered two of them already. We've got a diegesis, we've got catechesis, and then we're going to encounter perididomi, which is like more of a Jewish understanding of passing along of traditions. Like I said, Luke is virtue signaling his ability to write in the register of history and teaching. Yeah. All right. So this last clause is a purpose clause with a relative pronoun clause that is modifying and filling out logon. And so this would suggest that Theophilus actually has already received some catechesis, some instruction of some type. And we don't want to be anachronistic, like, are we talking 3rd century, 4th century catechesis of the church? No, but still this word did have some meaning of teaching and instruction. And yeah, I don't know if there's been a dissertation written on that, like to really study what this would imply in the 1st century context, maybe later 1st century. All right. So any questions so far? We kind of skipped ahead to the main sentence and its adverbs, and then we went to the purpose clause. And so basically, whenever you have a purpose clause, you need to consider the means of by which this is achieved. Which is here. to write an orderly account. So this orderly account, this writing out of an orderly account, is the means by which that the theophilus would know the certainty of the matters or the words. And really, logon can mean matter. We tend to think of it as words, but it has a broader sense of that. Yeah. So someone has asked, can we speak a little bit more about anatasso? Yeah. I don't know how this word is used culturally, but it's from tasso, which is a very common root verb stem, particularly in classical culture. And then with the ana, you're adding a prepositional prefix, which I think is probably additive. It may be just intensive. Whenever you have a preposition, sometimes it's apparent how it adds meaning to the verb stem. In this case, I think it may be additive. It might be intensive to organize in a series, because tasso already means organize. Well, I think tasso means to order things.
Yeah, and I was just thinking your comments about, the philosophical Jesus. I mean, here, this is a heavily philosophical Greek concept. Platonism of the order of the ideas.
Okay.
It has a very heavy metaphysical connotation to it, even a political connotation. Like in Athens right now, the civic square is called syntagma. The noun version of tasso. Yeah. So it's it has this very heavy idea of putting things in a proper logical space in a again, very philosophical frame. So I didn't know how that related to verse 3. If cathexis if that's just chronology, or how do those two relate? Do you see any relation there?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to me, thank you for that contribution. Yeah, these words are very rich. I think what you says holds, that this is actually kind of a philosophically charged or enriched word, that it really affirms what these other people have done. Because a lot of times we think, oh, well, Luke is writing out of a disappreciation of what others have done, when really this is like, look, they've really gone at this in a quite affirming way. I can affirm it as anatasso, anatassome. I think that's significant. But yeah, in terms of orderliness, I guess I might suggest that this might imply that Luke wants to have a little bit more historical accuracy, which is kind of lining up with, if you start to line up the words that he's using, it, akribos, in order, accuracy, it seems like he's after more of a kind of an accounting that is more historically accurate, I think. Yeah.
So can I ask one follow up on that? So if verse 1 anataxathe is him giving credit to the previous accounts, that like at least maybe not the results, but at least the intention they've attempted. That's been their intention, is to provide a reasonable, according to the logos, a reasonable account. What I want to add to that is this new dimension of a more thoroughgoing historical. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's brilliant, actually. I've used these verses, and I don't have my PowerPoint pulled up, but when I teach historical critical methods to our doctoral students, and sometimes I'll show them this verse these verses laid out in terms of types of criticism, and how, even sociological and historical and literary, like Luke, the way that he words it justifies those kinds of things. But I really think that your insider, adding of this has, in my mind, it's starting to really pop out. So Matthew's account is really an account of the fulfillment of Jesus. I mean, that's just a major theme throughout Matthew. Okay. Is Luke acknowledging Matthew? And in light of Jonathan Pennington's thesis, that Jesus is really presented as a philosopher, certainly a teacher and whatnot. I think, that makes sense here, that really Matthew has written an account that Jesus is Moses-like. I mean, that's as old as Bacon, his thesis a long time ago, 100 years ago or more, a couple hundred years, that, Matthew's discourse is organized as 5 great teaching discourses. And then I think of John's gospel, which is highly philosophical, even affirming Jesus as the Logos. And then Mark's account, which, apparently comes from Peter. And while in some ways it's the simplest of the Gospels, it also is not, it's also very rich and complex, and people have suggested it's arranged as a chiasm. And it really profiles Jesus as a teacher. In fact, Vernon Robbins has a book called Jesus as Teacher, and it's about looking at that in Mark. Wow. So, John has these long teaching discourses of Jesus. He's profiled as the Logos. Matthew shows Jesus as Moses-like in 5 great teaching discourses, with the Sermon on the Mount being an epitome, an epitome. And then Mark presenting Jesus, profiling him particularly as a teacher. Wow, it makes me think that Luke is writing after the composition of those other Gospels, because you really can't have many when there's only 2, I don't think. And I don't think it's likely that we've lost other Gospels. I just don't think it's likely. So I'm thinking, I would start to reason that Luke is writing at the end of the other Gospels. And I tend to date things earlier, quite honestly. I think Mark is 50s. I don't think it's 70. I think it's earlier. And so, and maybe John's gospel is written earlier than we often think. Yeah, but anyway, that's getting us into some larger historical questions. Yeah, oral traditions. Yeah, someone asked, does the many? Yeah, possibly. But I don't, we'd have to look at diegesis, whether that could be an oral category. I think diegesis is a technical term for a narrative, which I think, and I suspect, is probably written out. So here we have to go to the Greek progymnosmata exercises, where one of the exercises that students were learning was how to write out a narrative. Diegesis. I mean, it's a technical term for a narrative. Wow, there is so much here. And so let's look at verse 2. Just as, this is a subordinate clause, paradoson, the ones who were eyewitnesses and servants, the ones becoming eyewitnesses and servants of the word from the beginning, passed on to you, passed on to us. So here, Luke is betraying his sources. And there's 2 sources, eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Technical terms, particularly if you look at Acts, the servants of the word would be Paul. He would be a servant of the word. So you have a double historical witnesses, eyewitnesses, and then those who served in the word after the eyewitnesses. So, yeah.
You also have in Acts 6 this idea of them saying that they're not going to leave the ministry of the word to wait on tables so that the apostolic office. And then in Acts 2, the apostles' doctrine seems to be their understanding of themselves as being servants of the word.
Mm-hmm. In Acts, it occurs, John is the helper. I think this is Paul probably speaking here, Acts 26. So yeah, it's interesting to track in Luke how these words are used. I think other people beyond the original eyewitnesses. And then because you look up eyewitnesses. So in terms of the construction, what you have here is technically this participle genomenoi nu is a substantive participle. The ones having become. And then what are they becoming? This verb takes predicate nominatives, eyewitnesses, and servants. And here you have a discontinuous element, servants of the word, of the matter. And maybe that of the matter of the word applies to both eyewitnesses and then we have the qualifier from the beginning. So probably what you have is a nice balancing of two modifiers. One is from the beginning eyewitnesses, and then the other is servants of the word. So I would suggest that you have that going on. These are the sources, and they're passing this along to us. So there seems to be some broader appeal to a community. So not just Luke, individually, but that these people are sharing something that benefits us, both Theophilus, Luke, and then maybe other people as well. This is kind of like public material.
Excuse me.
You may have.
Pardon me, one other question. Mara.
You had just talked about Diageson, and yesterday I did a presentation on Lucian, who wrote How to Write History, and he was arguing for very clear boundaries between different types of genres, and he uses the term Diageson to describe narrative as the way you should do history.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Fun. So Mara just reported that she was looking at Lucian's discourse on how to write narrative and history, and technically he argues that diegesis is the way. Diegesis is the proper form of historical writing. So there is a lot to research here, and it's great to be in an environment like Asbury. We have doctoral students that are really pushing beyond me. And I don't want to be intimidated by that. I want to say go, because there's so much to be learned, really. And no one person can really take it all in. But yeah, a lot of good insight here, a lot of good feedback. So my contribution is to be aware of that background, also to be aware of the deep Greek constructions and that help profile and construe what's being said. So I think that's it. Any other questions?
Is the article hoi, is that connected to both of the nouns, or are you seeing
Celia? It's technically, I think, going with the gnomony.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Make that substantival, and then these are the predicate nominatives of the substantival participle.
Okay, I got you. Thanks, Dr. Long.
Yeah, you're very welcome. That's how I would do it. Yeah. All right, well, I think that's it. I think we've gone through most everything. Obviously, there's more granular detail that we could do, but I think we've gotten most of it. I've learned a lot. I always learn a lot when I am teaching from students' questions, and I start to see stuff that I hadn't otherwise seen. All right, well, we'll pick it up here, verse 5, and the Greek will be a little bit more straightforward. I mean, this is quite a, he's swinging for the fence with this introduction. I think it really is an elegant introduction. And so anyway, thanks for joining, and spread the word, and hope to see you next time.